I'm Miranda Rake.
And I'm Sarah Wheeler, and this is The Mother of It All, where we take on motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood.
Hi, Mother of It All listeners. Welcome back to our series exploring the impact of the pandemic lockdown on parents and families. In part 1, Sarah and I discussed the results of our survey of almost 500 parents about their experience of parenting through a global pandemic and all the ways in which those intense years continue to impact them and their families now, 5 years later. All month long, we're sharing conversations with a few of the survey respondents who had particularly striking or emblematic stories to tell. Today, I'm speaking with Ashleigh, a mom who spent much of 2020 at home helping her foster daughter navigate virtual school in one room, while her partner, a teacher, taught virtual school in another. Let's just start to begin with. Can you share a little bit about your home work life balance? Are you married and how old are your kids?
In 2020, I was partnered, not married legally, and my partner and I were just finishing up the process of becoming foster parents. So our approval was delayed because of the beginning of the pandemic, but then once it was approved, we pretty quickly had kids placed with us. And at the time, I was not working. I had just quit my job to be able to foster full time. And my partner was working in schools. Now we are legally married. We do not have any foster youth in our house right now. We are still foster parents, and we have a biological child who's 6 months old. And I am working from home with the baby.
So let's jump into your pandemic experience. So you mentioned, your partner was working in a school.
Yeah.
And you had your foster daughter was in middle school. Is that right?
Because the nature of foster care, it changed who was with us from 2020 to the end of 2022. But yes, initially we had a middle schooler placed with us. So our foster daughter was doing virtual school. My partner was doing virtual school in the other room. My foster daughter couldn't really stay in virtual school unless I was right next to her, and was often also on a video call with her social worker whose daughter was in virtual school, right? So it's just like infinity schools in our house. Yeah, it was very intense.
You shared that you also, I think, fostered a disabled daughter. Was this a different experience?
The impacts of foster care are impossible to overstate, right? So we also foster a daughter pretty deeply impacted by trauma, and that came out in a lot of really intense and real ways. And that foster daughter is with us much longer. She was in virtual school at first, but then schools opened back up again. Thank goodness. Mm-hmm. Things would have been very, very different if she was just home with us all the time. But she was able to go to school in person, but anyway, it was a whole thing. Yeah. But the logistics of that were also wild, and she had pretty intense therapy needs and physical therapy needs, and all of that was still virtual instead of in person because of the pandemic, which meant that I was case managing and navigating that and finding appointments and then home with her and then doing the exercises that we got from the professional, right? It was more than full time, managing her care.
Yeah. That sounds incredibly intense. And in the isolation, that was another thing that really struck me about your responses. Obviously, you had extremely unique circumstances, but also your sentiment of isolation and overwhelm is very universal, I think, for parents in the pandemic, whatever the reason. And
no, it was so lonely. And I know parenting can be lonely without a pandemic, without fostering, but I think I was maybe unique, maybe not, but individually experiencing this sense of am I even a parent? Does this count? Like, am I allowed to identify with the writers who I'm following who are posting about the like overwhelm and isolation of like fostering or parenting in this like period of time? And so that was like, I think, my own identity crisis and like coming into a thing, right? And I did get, I finally decided I don't care if I'm allowed to or not. I do like take a lot of comfort from things other people are saying and experiencing. But
yes,
yeah,
you were retroactively. I invite you to the collective scream. Like you're
Thank you.
yes, you count. So yeah, you know, one of the things that I wanted to ask you more about, you say about kind of this feeling, like it is such a parent feeling, even aside from pandemic. It's like, I experienced it last week when like I was just we had snow days and we had all this and I was trying to work and my husband was gone and I was, you know, like the loneliness of parenthood sometimes is extremely intense. And obviously the pandemic was like on steroids, but in you, I mean, so you wrote about a specific moment when you had this daughter who really needed a lot. And you say that it was incredibly devastating when childcare or therapy fell through because of infections. And you know, and I assume like just any symptoms, right? Like we weren't supposed to go anywhere if you were like a little bit sick at all. And kids are sick all the time. And so you shared this story that in winter of 2021, the daughter you were fostering was going through an incredibly hard time. She had finally gotten the vaccine. You had a friend who could take her for the weekend. You're like living for the break. And then this friend would only take her if she had tested negative on a PCR test, meaning assuming you have to go to a clinic to get that.
Or in our region, we have a lot of drive-through.
Okay. Yeah. But you needed an appointment and then you missed it because of a meltdown.
Yes.
And then she refused an at-home test, which, I mean, that's relatable. And then your sister was going to come stay, but she got sick. And then you kind of like white knuckle through, and then a snowstorm canceled school.
Yes, I still, even like this winter, my partner was like, it still comes up for you every year since, the like memory of that. No, I felt so, going into it, I had a plan A, B, C, D, and E. Like I was like, here's this plan, here's this one. If this falls through, we have that. If this falls through, we have that. I knew that like my survival was dependent on childcare. So I had childcare, right? Like, and every single thing like crumbling at once. And this was a kid who didn't play independently. Right? Like she was older, but I was physically shoulder to shoulder with her all day long. And she needed a very intense level of engagement and entertainment, and like, it was a lot for me emotionally, and I knew I could only maintain this with breaks, and every break falling through. And then the snow days was cruel.
That's just it's very visceral I mean, the dominoes, I hear the dominoes falling. And I think that is something that gets at what I'm interested in all of these conversations, which is, how is it all still with you? You know, and because I think it's all still with us and we just don't really talk about it and think about it. So I'd love to hear, how does this impact, you know, your well-being, the life of your family? You know,
Yes, I think you're right. It's still with us. It's definitely still with me. Like I just said, like my partner brings up on the like year anniversary of that event that I like, my nervous system like has a reaction to it, right? And I think one way it's like still with me is how weird it feels when things don't feel that way, like that I have to remind myself like this is not that moment. We do have more options right now. I can trust, not that it was a lack of trust or like people didn't let me down in that example, right? It was a pandemic, it was illnesses, it was nobody failed, like apart from like massive systems, but like there wasn't like a personal letdown there, right? Like but it is, I think, harder for me to like relax into any sense of abundance or enoughness, or it has been surprising to me having a newborn, an infant who's biologically mine, like that sometimes I experience feeling like enough for her, and how like different that feels than what my parenting has felt like so far. How different it feels to have people who have the skills to care for her that aren't specialized in the way they need to be for a lot of youth in care. And I think the foreignness of that comes up for me constantly every day.
Yeah, you know, the word trust, I think, comes up a lot for a lot of people when we think about that time. And another interesting tension that I want to get at in your responses was that you mentioned also that you learned, you say the pandemic is the reason you know your neighbors. And that through it, you learned so much about interdependence. And you use that word interdependence over and over again. And
sounds like me.
And I loved that. And I think it feels like you had this big kind of like revelation moment. And I'd love to hear about that. I mean, that is like really interesting. And I think there is like a scary side where you're like, oh, shoot, dang it, I need people. Like, darn it.
And the flip side of that is, oh, cool, there are people, right? Like, and yes, literally at that time, like my physical neighbors, I got to know in a different way, got to like trust in a different way. And the pandemic in so many ways felt like not that it was about me and my like my own personal self-growth, right? Like, I know it's kind of bigger than that, but like such an object lesson in interdependence, like things that made sense to me intellectually, or honestly didn't make that much sense to me intellectually, but like I said it and like believed it, right? Like even like I think Angela Davis, but I should double check before I say this, especially recorded, but like that like charity versus like acting in solidarity, and like your freedom is wrapped up in mine. Like I was like, yeah, but I didn't really get it until like, oh, literally I'm only as healthy as my neighbors are, I'm only as safe as my neighbors are. It's not like it's not a metaphor, it's literally true that that my health is completely dependent on the people around me's like health and capacity and what they have access to. And I am really grateful that as an intense of a like first parenting experience as that was, entering this like newer version of parenting for me, I cannot pretend for a second that it's all on me, or that I'm in it alone, or that like it's reasonable or real to expect that I can do everything. And that was like so humbling for me to learn in such an intense way. But I think my ability to accept help and to offer help, I have a personal philosophy. I do not cancel plans on moms. Like I obviously if I get sick, I come up with a like FaceTime something instead. But like the like heartbreak that happened when I would like line things up and when somebody couldn't come, or when it right, like that is like still with me in a way that if I make a plan with a parent, I'm there when I say I'm going to be there. And and having benefited from that and been hurt by a lack of that, I think has totally shifted like what it is to view children. Anyway, I'm rambling, but like that now my baby is like only as well as I am. Not like that wellness is it, but like her safety is wrapped up in my safety, and my safety is wrapped up in everybody else's safety. And so that's like a really different mindset, I think, to do advocacy, to do care work, to do anything that it couldn't possibly be charity. It's selfish. I want to be okay, and I want my baby to be okay, and I want everybody else's babies to be okay. And you can't like untangle the thread and have just independence. So here we are, right? But
yes. No, yes. I mean, I think that, that's the lesson for so many parents. And that's part of why we wanted to do this too, because I think a lot of us are out here living this with this knowledge that we gained in those years. That's like, oh my God, like we are the only people who are going to save each other. It's like our other parents, our neighbors, our immediate communities.
And the reason I got it was complicated because of foster care, at least in the state that I'm in. I don't need to go into it, but permissions for the COVID vaccine were a different process than for every other vaccine for kids in care. It required a higher level of it required written consent from a biological parent, which for a lot of practical reasons was pretty hard to procure. And so I had vaccine appointment, and it used to be hard to get the COVID vaccine, right?
Yes.
I scheduled 2 vaccines a week for 6 months, 6 months, 4 months.
Just in case, in case you got...
And would cancel them beforehand that the second I had permission, we already had an appointment lined up. But the reason I brought that up, that was made possible by a Facebook group I was in with people finding vaccines for each other that was largely composed of parents, largely mothers, right? Like, who knew where, like, that sharing of information, that was like a virtual version of it, but it wouldn't have happened without, like, the, like, solidarity and information that other people had that I got to tap into and make possible for the kid in my house. So, like, it was that for everything, right? For educational advocacy, for therapy, for, like, we made it through because of other people.
Ashleigh, I really appreciate you revisiting all of this with me, because I know it's a trip to go back.
Thank you. No, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for hearing people's stories and getting them out. What a big deal.
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Knox Media with music from It's Electric. If you like this episode, why not send it to a friend right now? Go on, we'll wait. You can follow us on Substack at themotherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox and connect you with the Mother of It All listener community. Plus, become a paid subscriber and get a hot off the presses Mother of It All canvas tote. We're also on Instagram at The Mother of It All, and you can email us anytime with ideas or feedback at motherculturepod@gmail.com.